I won the biggest lottery jackpot in state history but decided to keep it secret. I called my family pretending to be desperate for money, just to see who would help. My parents hung up on me. My sister said I was a loser. But my younger brother drove 200 miles with his last $500. What I did next changed everything. My name is Michael Harrison. I am 33 years old and I work as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Phoenix, Arizona. Most people would look at my life and think I have it reasonably figured out. Decent job, reliable income, a small apartment in a safe neighborhood. Not the kind of success story that makes headlines, but solid and respectable. The kind of life that middle-class Americans build through steady work and careful financial planning. What they do not know is that 18 months ago, my life changed in a way that should have been the answer to every prayer I had ever whispered. Instead, it became the beginning of the most painful education I have ever received about the people I thought I knew best. It was a Tuesday in March when everything changed. Not the kind of day you would expect to mark a turning point in your life. Just a regular Tuesday with the usual Phoenix spring weather. Warm but not yet blazing. The kind of day that makes you remember why people moved to Arizona in the first place. I was on my lunch break from the accounting firm, walking to the sandwich shop 2 blocks from our office building when I decided to stop at the convenience store to buy a lottery ticket. I had never been much of a gambler. Growing up in a family where every dollar was accounted for and financial stability was the highest virtue, I had been raised to see lottery tickets as a tax on people who are bad at math. But something about that particular day felt different. Maybe it was the way the sunlight was hitting the lottery display. Or maybe it was just the accumulated stress of another tax season making me desperate for any kind of escape from the endless columns of numbers that define my professional life. One Powerball ticket, I told the clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who had probably sold thousands of tickets to people with similar hopes and similar odds of disappointment. Quick pick, or do you want to choose your numbers? Quick pick is fine. She handed me the ticket with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had performed this transaction countless times, and I folded it into my wallet without looking at the numbers. It was not about the numbers anyway. It was about the possibility, however remote, that maybe life could be different than the careful, predictable path I had been following since college. I forgot about the ticket for 3 days. When I finally remembered to check the numbers on Friday evening, I was sitting in my living room with a beer and a frozen dinner, watching the kind of mindless television that helps you decompress after a week of analyzing other people's financial mistakes. The winning numbers appeared on the screen during a commercial break for the evening news. 12, 28, 35, 47, 52 Powerball 19. I looked at my ticket. Then I looked at the screen. Then I looked at my ticket again. 12, 28, 35, 47, 52 Powerball 19. For about 30 seconds, I was convinced I was misreading something. This kind of thing did not happen to people like me. Middle-class accountants from Phoenix do not win 57 million lottery jackpots. We balance budgets and maximize retirement contributions and buy sensible cars that we drive until the maintenance costs exceed the monthly payment on a newer model. But the numbers on my ticket matched the numbers on the screen and no amount of double-checking was going to change that reality. I had won $57 million. My first instinct was to call someone, to share the news, to celebrate, to find some way to make this impossible thing feel real by involving other people in the experience. I picked up my phone and started to dial my parents' number, then stopped. What would I say? How do you announce something like this without sounding like you have lost your mind? Instead, I spent the weekend researching what happens when you win the lottery. I learned about taxes and annuity payments versus lump sums. I learned about financial advisors and investment strategies and the surprisingly high percentage of lottery winners who end up bankrupt within a few years of their windfall. Most importantly, I learned about family dynamics and how sudden wealth can destroy relationships that took decades to build. The stories were remarkably consistent. Lottery winners who were overwhelmed by requests for money from relatives they had not heard from in years. Families torn apart by arguments over who deserved what portion of the winnings. Children who suddenly saw their parents as ATM machines rather than human beings. Marriages that collapsed under the pressure of managing more money than they had ever dreamed of having. By Monday morning, I had made a decision that would define the next 18 months of my life. I was not going to tell anyone about winning the lottery. Not yet. Not until I had a better understanding of what this windfall meant and how it would change my relationships with the people I cared about. I claimed the prize through a trust, following the advice of the Lottery Commission and the financial advisor I hired to help me navigate the legal and tax implications. After federal and state taxes, I ended up with approximately $34 million in a carefully managed investment portfolio that would generate enough income to support any lifestyle I might want to pursue. But I kept living in my apartment. I kept driving my 8-year-old Honda Civic. I kept going to work every day and analyzing spreadsheets and pretending that nothing had changed. The only difference was that now I had a secret that grew heavier every day. Living with that kind of secret is like carrying around a weight that no one else can see. Every conversation with friends and family became a performance, a careful balance between maintaining my old identity and managing the knowledge that I could solve almost any problem they mentioned with a single check. When my sister complained about student loan payments, I nodded sympathetically while calculating that I could pay off her debt with what my investments earned in 3 days. When my parents worried about retirement savings, I offered generic advice about 401k contributions while knowing I could fund their entire retirement without affecting my own financial security. The secret was isolating, but it also gave me perspective on my relationships that I had never had before. For the first time in my life, I was able to observe how people treated me when they believed I had nothing to offer them beyond my personality and company. It was an interesting experiment in human nature, though not always a comfortable one. After 6 months of living this double life, I realized I needed to make a decision about what to do with the money and how to integrate this new reality into my existing relationships. But before I made any permanent choices about changing my life, I wanted to understand something important about the people I was considering sharing my fortune with. I wanted to know who would help me if I really needed it. The idea came to me during a particularly difficult week at work when I was dealing with a client whose financial situation had deteriorated due to circumstances beyond their control. Watching them struggle with bills they could not pay and obligations they could not meet made me think about how many people in my own life had ever experienced genuine financial desperation. My family had always been middle class, comfortable enough to avoid true hardship, but not wealthy enough to be casual about money. How would they respond if I was the one who needed help? I decided to find out. The test I designed was simple but comprehensive. I would call each member of my immediate family and explain that I was facing a financial crisis. I would tell them that I had lost my job, fallen behind on rent, and needed help to avoid eviction. I would ask for specific amounts of money, not huge sums, but significant enough to represent a real sacrifice for someone with limited resources. The goal was not to trick them or humiliate them. It was to understand their character in a way that normal circumstances would never reveal. When someone you care about is in genuine need, your response says something fundamental about your values and priorities. I wanted to know before I potentially changed our family dynamics forever with my lottery winnings who could be counted on when the chips were down. I started with my parents. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something serious," I said when he answered the phone on a Saturday morning in October. "I am in real trouble here." "What kind of trouble, Michael?" I could hear the immediate concern in his voice, which gave me hope that this conversation might go better than I feared. "I lost my job 3 weeks ago, budget cuts at the firm. I have been trying to find something else, but you know how the market is right now. I am behind on rent and my landlord is threatening eviction. I need help." There was a long pause. I could hear my mother asking questions in the background and my father explaining the situation in hushed tones. "Michael, that is terrible news. I wish you had called sooner, but you know our situation. Mom's medical bills from last year wiped out most of our savings, and we are barely keeping up with our own expenses. I do not see how we can help you financially right now. Dad, I am not asking for a loan. I am asking for help. $3,000 would cover my rent and utilities until I can find another job. I know it is a lot of money, but I am desperate here." Another pause, longer this time. "Son, I understand you are scared, but you are 33 years old. You have a college degree and professional experience. Maybe this is an opportunity to figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet instead of looking for someone else to solve your problems." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because I actually needed the money, but because of what they revealed about how my father saw me. In his mind, asking for help during a financial crisis was evidence of weakness rather than the natural response of someone facing circumstances beyond their control. "So you are saying no?" "I am saying you need to handle this yourself. That is what being an adult means." I hung up the phone and sat in my apartment for an hour processing what had just happened. My father, who had raised me to believe that family comes first and we support each other through difficult times, had essentially told me that I was on my own when I needed help most. But maybe he was just having a bad day. Maybe the stress of my mother's health issues and their own financial pressures had made him less generous than he would normally be. Maybe my mother would respond differently. I called her the next day. "Michael, honey, your father told me about your situation. I am so sorry you are going through this." "Thanks, Mom. I know Dad said you guys could not help, but I was hoping maybe you could lend me something, even if it is not the full amount. Anything would help right now." "Oh, sweetheart, I wish I could, but you know how tight things are for us right now. Besides, your father thinks this might be good for you in the long run. A chance to learn some independence." "Mom, I am facing eviction. This is not about independence. This is about having a place to live. Well, maybe you could move back home for a while, just until you get back on your feet. Moving back home at 33 years old with a secret fortune that could buy their house outright. My mother's solution to my supposed financial crisis was for me to move into my childhood bedroom and start over like a teenager who had failed to launch. I cannot move back home, Mom. I need to stay in Phoenix for job interviews. I just need a temporary loan to get through the next few weeks. I am sorry, honey, but we just cannot do it right now. Maybe you could ask your sister. My sister Lisa, 2 years younger than me, married to a guy who worked in sales, living in a nice house in Scottsdale with their 2 young children. Lisa had always been the family success story, the one who seemed to have it all figured out while I was still trying to find my direction in life. I called her that evening. Lisa, I need to ask you for a favor. A big favor? What kind of favor? I explained the situation again. Lost job, behind on rent, facing eviction. I asked for $3,000, the same amount I had requested from our parents. Michael, I wish I could help, but $3,000 is a lot of money. That is almost half of what we pay for daycare every month. Brad and I have our own bills to worry about. I understand it is a lot of money, but I am your brother and I am in real trouble here. I would do the same for you if the situation was reversed. Would you though? When have you ever helped any of us with anything? You barely call. You skip half the family gatherings. And now suddenly you want $3,000 because you could not keep a job. Her words stung because they contained enough truth to make me question my own motives. I had become distant from my family over the years, partly because of my naturally introverted personality and partly because I found their constant discussions about money and status exhausting. But I had never realized that they interpreted my distance as selfishness. Lisa, I know I have not been the most involved brother, but this is different. This is an emergency. Look, Michael, I feel bad for you. I really do. But you are an adult and adults figure out their own problems. Maybe this is a wake-up call. Maybe you need to get serious about your career instead of just drifting through life, waiting for someone else to take care of you. Drifting through life. According to my sister, my steady job as a senior accountant constituted drifting through life. According to my sister, asking for help during a financial emergency meant I was waiting for someone else to take care of me. I hung up the phone and realized that I was learning something important about my family that I had never understood before. When they looked at me, they did not see someone who was competent but temporarily struggling. They saw someone who was fundamentally inadequate, someone whose problems were the predictable result of character flaws rather than bad luck. But I still had one more call to make. My younger brother Jake was 28 years old and worked as a mechanic in Tucson. He had never gone to college, never had what anyone would call a prestigious career, but he was the kind of person who would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. Growing up, Jake had always been the family peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and made sure everyone felt included. If anyone in my family would help me, it would be Jake. Jake, I need to talk to you about something important. I am in serious financial trouble. I explained the situation for the 4th time, but with Jake, I found myself being more honest about how scared and desperate I was supposedly feeling. Maybe because I knew he would not judge me for being vulnerable. Or maybe because I genuinely wanted him to understand the gravity of what I was asking for. Man, that sucks. I am really sorry you are going through this. $3,000, huh? I know it is a lot of money. If you cannot do it, I understand. But I have already asked Mom and Dad and Lisa, and nobody can help. You are my last option here. Michael, I do not have $3,000 in savings. I do not think I have ever had $3,000 in savings, but let me think about this for a minute. There was a long pause and I could hear him talking to his girlfriend in the background. Okay, here is what I can do. I have about $800 in my checking account and I can probably get another $700 from my credit card without maxing it out. That is $1,500 total. It is not what you need, but it is everything I can come up with right now. I was quiet for so long that Jake started to worry he had offended me. I know it is not enough, but maybe it would help you buy some time and I could drive up there this weekend and help you look for work. I know some guys in Phoenix who might know about openings. My younger brother, who barely made $30,000 a year fixing cars, was offering to give me more than half of his available cash and drive 4 hours to help me look for work. My parents, who owned their house outright and had retirement savings, could not spare $3,000. My sister, who lived in a $500,000 house and took family vacations to Europe, could not help her supposedly desperate brother. But Jake, who had to choose between paying his credit card bill and helping his family, was ready to max out his available credit to keep me from being evicted. Jake, I cannot take your money. You need that for your own expenses. Michael, you are my brother. If you are really facing eviction, then we figure it out together. That is what family does. That is what family does. According to Jake, family helps each other through emergencies without calculating the cost or questioning whether the person in need deserves assistance. According to our parents and sister, family teaches tough love and independence by refusing to enable supposedly irresponsible behavior. Let me think about it overnight, I told Jake. I might have some other options I need to explore first. Okay, but do not wait too long. If you need the money, I can drive up there tomorrow with cash. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the evidence of my secret wealth. Investment statements showing a balance that grew by thousands of dollars every day. Bank records showing more money than my entire family would earn in their lifetimes. And thought about what I had learned. My parents saw my supposed financial crisis as evidence that I was irresponsible and needed to learn independence through suffering. My sister saw it as confirmation that I was a failure who expected others to solve my problems. But Jake saw it as a family emergency that required immediate action regardless of the personal cost. The test had revealed something I had never fully understood about the people I was raised with. When push came to shove, only one of them was willing to make a genuine sacrifice to help me. Only one of them believed that family obligations extend beyond moral support and good advice. Only one of them loved me enough to put my welfare ahead of their own financial security. I spent the next few weeks thinking about what to do with this information. I could reveal the truth about the lottery winnings and use the money to bring my family closer together. Or I could use my newfound wealth to build a new life that reflected the reality of who could be counted on when it mattered most. The decision was easier than I expected. 3 months later in January, I called my family to announce that I was moving to Denver for a new job opportunity. I told them I had found a position with a financial planning firm that offered a significant salary increase and better long-term career prospects. All of this was technically true. I had indeed found such a position and I was indeed planning to move to Denver. I simply did not mention that I did not need the job or the salary. I also did not mention that I was buying a house in Denver and that Jake would be moving with me. The conversation with Jake had happened over Thanksgiving dinner at my apartment. I had cooked for the two of us since I was supposedly too broke to travel home for the holiday and he had volunteered to keep me company. It was during that dinner that I told him the truth about the lottery ticket. "You won how much?" he said, setting down his fork and staring at me like I had announced I was an alien from Mars. $57 million before taxes, about $34 million after everything was settled, and you have been sitting on this information for 8 months. I wanted to understand some things about my life before I made any big changes, including understanding who I could trust with this kind of information. I told him about the test I had conducted, about the responses I had received from our parents and Lisa, and about his willingness to sacrifice his own financial security to help me when I supposedly needed it. That was a test, Michael. I was ready to max out my credit cards for you. I know, and that is exactly why you are the only person in our family who is going to know about this money. Jake was quiet for a long time processing the implications of what I was telling him. What about Mom and Dad? What about Lisa? What about them? They made it clear that they see me as someone who should handle his own problems. So that is exactly what I am going to do. But this changes everything. You could help them with Mom's medical bills. Help Lisa with her kids' college funds. Make sure everyone is taken care of. With what motivation? So they can treat me better because I have money. So they can pretend they would have helped me when I needed it. Jake understood what I meant. But he struggled with the idea of keeping such a significant secret from our family. Look, I said, I am not planning to cut them off completely. I am just not planning to share my wealth with people who would not share their much smaller wealth with me. But you were willing to give me everything you had. That kind of loyalty deserves to be rewarded. I do not want to be rewarded for being a decent brother. It is not about reward. It is about partnership. I want to start a business, something that matters more than just managing my own money. I want you to be my partner. The business idea had been developing in my mind for months. A combination investment firm and charitable foundation focused on helping working-class families achieve financial stability. We would provide financial planning services, emergency loans, and educational resources to people who were typically excluded from traditional wealth management services. Jake would run the day-to-day operations while I handled the financial strategy and regulatory compliance. It would give him a chance to build something meaningful while still honoring his natural inclination to help people who were struggling. You are serious about this? Completely serious. We start with a $5 million investment and see how much good we can do with it. If it works, we expand. If it does not, we try something else. And Mom and Dad and Lisa, they do not need to know about the business or where the funding came from. As far as they are concerned, I got a good job in Denver and you decided to move there with me to try something new. The move to Denver went smoothly. I bought a house in a nice but not ostentatious neighborhood, the kind of place a successful financial planner might be able to afford. Jake moved into the guest house behind the main property and we began the process of setting up our business. For 6 months, we maintained the fiction that I was working for someone else while quietly building the infrastructure for our own firm. Jake took courses in financial planning and business management. I obtained the necessary licenses and certifications. We developed relationships with attorneys, accountants, and other professionals who could help us serve our target clientele. By the time we officially launched Harrison Brothers Financial Services, we were ready to make a real impact in our community. Our first year exceeded all expectations. We helped more than 200 families improve their financial situations, prevented dozens of foreclosures, and demonstrated that ethical financial services could be both profitable and socially beneficial. Jake turned out to be a natural at connecting with clients who had been intimidated or ignored by traditional financial advisors. He spoke their language, understood their challenges, and never made them feel judged for their past financial mistakes. Within 18 months, he was earning more money than he had ever dreamed of making. And he was doing it by helping people who reminded him of his own family background. Meanwhile, my relationship with our parents and Lisa continued much as it had before, except with more geographical distance. We talked occasionally, exchanged holiday cards, and maintained the kind of polite but superficial connection that many adult siblings have with their families. They never asked about my financial situation and I never volunteered information about how well the business was doing. I think they assumed I was doing fine but not spectacularly well, comfortable but not wealthy. The same sort of middle-class existence they had always expected me to achieve. Jake struggled with maintaining the secret, especially during family phone calls when our parents would mention money worries or when Lisa would complain about the cost of her children's activities. He wanted to help them and he could not understand why I was comfortable letting them struggle with problems that I could solve effortlessly. It is not about the money. I tried to explain during one of our regular conversations about family dynamics. It is about what the money represents. If I solve their financial problems now, it changes our relationship in a way that can never be undone. They will always wonder if I am helping them out of love or out of guilt. They will always question whether they should be grateful or resentful. But they are still family. Are they though? When I needed help, they treated me like a burden. When I supposedly lost my job, they saw it as evidence of my personal failings rather than a situation that required family support. Why should their financial problems be my responsibility when my financial problems were not theirs? Jake could not argue with the logic, but he remained uncomfortable with the emotional reality of watching our family struggle while we prospered in secret. The test came again unexpectedly 2 years after my move to Denver. My mother called on a Tuesday evening in March, almost exactly 3 years after I had bought the winning lottery ticket. She sounded older than I remembered, more fragile, and her voice carried a kind of desperation that I had never heard before. "Michael, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know how hard this is for me." "What is it, Mom?" "Your father had another heart attack last week, a bigger one this time. He is going to be okay, but the doctors want him to have surgery, and our insurance is not going to cover all of it. We are looking at about $40,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. $40,000, less than what my investments earned in a typical week, but apparently enough to create a genuine financial crisis for my parents. I am so sorry, Mom. I had no idea Dad was having health problems. He did not want to worry you kids. You know how he is about showing weakness. But we do not have $40,000, Michael. We do not even have $10,000. And the hospital wants a payment plan before they will schedule the surgery." This was the conversation I had been expecting for 3 years. The moment when my parents would need help badly enough to ask for it and I would have to decide how to respond. "What do you need from me, Mom? I know you are doing better now with your new job and everything and I was hoping maybe you could help us with some of the cost. Not all of it, just whatever you can afford. Even $5,000 would make a huge difference." $5,000. 2 years earlier, they could not spare $3,000 to help me avoid supposed eviction. Now, they were asking me to contribute $5,000 to cover medical expenses that they should have been preparing for throughout their adult lives. The irony was almost too perfect. "Mom, you know, I want to help Dad get the surgery he needs. Let me look at my finances and see what I can do." "Oh, thank you, sweetheart. I know this is a lot to ask. But we do not have anyone else to turn to." They did not have anyone else to turn to except that they did have someone else to turn to. They just did not know it. I hung up the phone and called Jake to tell him about the conversation. "You are going to help them, right?" he said immediately. "Of course, I'm going to help them. The question is how much to help them and how to do it in a way that makes sense." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I could write a check for $40,000 tomorrow and solve their entire problem, but that would raise questions about where I got that kind of money." Or I could contribute what they asked for and let them figure out the rest, which is probably what they expect anyway. Jake was quiet for a moment. What if there was a third option? What kind of third option? What if the money came from someone else? Someone who had reason to help them but was not directly connected to our family. I realized what he was suggesting. An anonymous donor. Think about it. Dad has worked for the same company for 30 years. Mom has been volunteering at the church for almost as long. They have probably helped dozens of people over the years in ways they never talked about. It would not be completely unbelievable for someone to want to return the favor. It was elegant in its simplicity. I could solve my parents' financial crisis without revealing my own wealth or creating complicated family dynamics. They would receive the help they needed while maintaining their dignity and independence. And I would be able to honor my obligation to family without compromising the boundaries I had established. How would we set it up? Leave that to me. I know a guy who knows a guy. By Friday, your parents will receive a certified letter from a law firm explaining that an anonymous benefactor has chosen to cover their medical expenses in recognition of their service to the community. And they will never know it came from me. They will never know it came from you. The plan worked perfectly. My parents received the letter on Friday afternoon and my mother called me that evening to share the miraculous news. Michael, you will never believe what happened. Someone we do not even know paid for your father's surgery. The whole thing. $40,000 from a complete stranger who said we helped them through a difficult time years ago. That is incredible. Mom. Dad must be so relieved. He cried when I read him the letter. I have not seen your father cry since his own father died. He keeps saying he cannot believe someone would do something like that for us. I could hear the emotion in her voice, the overwhelming gratitude and amazement at receiving such unexpected generosity. It was the same emotion I might have heard if she had known the money came from her son, but without the complicated feelings of obligation and resentment that might have accompanied a family gift. You raised us to believe that what goes around comes around. I said, maybe this is just the universe paying Dad back for all the good he has done over the years. Maybe so. Maybe so. After my father's successful surgery and recovery, my relationship with my parents improved in ways I had not expected. They seemed more relaxed during our phone calls, less stressed about money, more interested in hearing about my life in Denver. It was as if the anonymous gift had lifted a weight from their shoulders that I had not even realized they were carrying. But I also noticed that they never asked if I could contribute to the medical expenses, even after learning that the anonymous donor had covered everything. They never circled back to ask if I wanted to help with other costs associated with my father's recovery. It was as if they had never expected me to be able to help in the first place. Lisa's reaction to the story was different. I cannot believe someone just gave them $40,000. She said during our next phone conversation, people do not do things like that anymore. It makes me wonder if they know who it really was and they are just not telling us. Why would they keep it secret? Maybe because they do not want us to feel obligated to thank someone, or maybe because they are embarrassed about accepting charity. Lisa's instinct that there was more to the story than our parents were sharing made me nervous. But Jake assured me that the legal arrangements were airtight. Even if someone tried to investigate the source of the gift, they would only trace it back to a legitimate charitable foundation that regularly made anonymous donations to families in need. Besides, Jake pointed out, Lisa is not actually suspicious about the money. She is just jealous that your parents got something she did not get. He was right. Lisa's subsequent comments about the anonymous gift always carried an undertone of resentment. As if she felt that she and her family were equally deserving of unexpected financial assistance. It never seemed to occur to her that our parents had received help because they needed it, not because they deserved it more than anyone else. The success of the anonymous gift strategy got me thinking about other ways I could use my wealth to help people in my life without creating complicated social dynamics. Over the next year, I made several additional anonymous donations, to Jake's ex-girlfriend who was struggling with student loan debt, to a former co-worker who was facing foreclosure, to my old church to fund a youth program that was about to be cut due to budget constraints. Each time I experienced the satisfaction of solving serious problems for people I cared about without having to navigate the complex emotions that come with known gifts. The recipients got the help they needed while maintaining their dignity. I got the satisfaction of using my wealth for good without dealing with gratitude, obligation, or changed relationships. But I also started to understand something important about the psychology of wealth that I had not anticipated when I first won the lottery. Having the power to solve people's problems with money is intoxicating. Knowing that you can make someone's biggest worry disappear with a single phone call gives you a sense of control and importance that can become addictive. The more anonymous gifts I made, the more I wanted to make. The more problems I solved, the more problems I started looking for. I began to see financial struggles everywhere I looked. And I began to feel responsible for addressing them. It was a kind of wealthy person's burden that I had never heard anyone talk about. The pressure to help everyone because you have the resources to help everyone. Jake noticed the change in my behavior before I did. "You are starting to act like you think you are God," he said during one of our regular dinner conversations. "What do you mean?" "I mean you are trying to solve everyone's problems with money. And that is not how life works. Some problems are supposed to be hard. Some struggles are supposed to teach people things they need to learn. You cannot just write checks for everyone you feel sorry for. Why not? If I can help people, why should not I help them? Because help without context is not always helpful. Because solving people's problems for them does not actually make them stronger or more capable. Because you are not responsible for fixing everything that is broken in the world." It was a hard conversation, but I needed to hear it. I had started to lose perspective on the difference between helping people in genuine emergencies and enabling people to avoid the natural consequences of their choices. I had started to see my wealth as a tool for creating the world I wanted to live in rather than as a resource for addressing specific needs when they arose. I scaled back the anonymous gifts and refocused on growing our business and building wealth that could be sustainably shared with people who were working to improve their own situations. Instead of solving problems for people, we started teaching them how to solve problems for themselves. The business continued to thrive. By our third year, we had helped more than 1,000 families improve their financial situations, and we had expanded into 3 additional cities. Jake had become one of the most respected financial advisors in Denver. Known for his ability to connect with clients who had been overlooked by traditional firms. I had achieved something that my lottery ticket had never guaranteed. I had built a meaningful life that reflected my values and priorities. I was using my wealth to make a positive impact on my community while maintaining honest relationships with the people I cared about. But I still had not told my parents and Lisa the truth about the lottery winnings. The secret had become such a fundamental part of my identity that I could not imagine my life without it. It gave me freedom to be myself without worrying about how my family's perceptions of me might change if they knew about my wealth. It allowed me to maintain relationships based on genuine affection rather than financial obligation. Most importantly, it allowed me to continue testing the character of the people in my life without them knowing they were being tested. That final test came 4 years after I had moved to Denver when Lisa called to ask for help with her eldest daughter's college expenses. "Michael, I need to ask you for a favor and I want you to know how difficult this is for me." The conversation felt like a replay of my mother's call about my father's medical expenses, except this time the amount was much larger. "Emma got accepted to Stanford." Lisa continued, "It is her dream school, and she worked so hard to get in, but even with financial aid, we are looking at almost $30,000 a year in out-of-pocket expenses. Brad and I have saved what we could, but it is not enough. $30,000 a year, $120,000 over 4 years, more than my annual salary when I was working as an accountant, but a tiny fraction of what my investments generated every month. That is a lot of money, Lisa. What are you thinking in terms of what you need from me? I know you were doing well with your business in Denver, and I was hoping maybe you could help us with some of Emma's expenses. Not all of it, just whatever you can afford. Even $10,000 would make a huge difference. $10,000. Just enough to show that I cared about my niece's education, but not enough to make a significant impact on the overall problem. It was exactly the kind of partial solution that would let my sister feel like she had done everything possible to help her daughter while still requiring her to find the remaining $110,000 elsewhere. "Lisa, you know, I want Emma to be able to go to Stanford if that is what she wants. Let me think about this and get back to you." "Thank you, Michael. I know this is a lot to ask, but family is family, right? Family is family." The same sister who had told me that adults handle their own problems when I supposedly needed help with rent was now invoking family obligation to ask for financial assistance with her daughter's education expenses. I hung up the phone and realized that I had learned everything I needed to know about my family's values and priorities. When they needed help, they expected family members to sacrifice for each other. When I supposedly needed help, they expected me to learn independence through struggle. The double standard was so clear that I wondered how I had missed it for so many years. I called Jake to discuss the situation. "So, what are you going to do?" "I am going to help Emma go to Stanford, but I am not going to do it the way Lisa expects." Another anonymous donor. "Something like that. But this time, I want Lisa to understand that financial help comes from people who care about education and opportunity, not from family members who are expected to solve each other's problems." The scholarship I established through our charitable foundation was specifically designed for students from middle-class families who had been accepted to prestigious universities but could not afford the full cost of attendance. Emma was one of our first recipients, receiving a 4-year scholarship that covered her entire tuition and living expenses at Stanford. When Lisa called to tell me about Emma's scholarship, she sounded amazed and grateful, but also slightly confused. Someone created a scholarship program specifically for kids like Emma. She said it is like they knew exactly what our situation was and designed the program to help families like ours. That is wonderful. Lisa, Emma must be so excited. She is over the moon. But it is also a little strange. You know, first mom and dad get that anonymous gift for dad's surgery. And now Emma gets a full scholarship from a foundation nobody has ever heard of. It makes you wonder if there is some kind of guardian angel looking out for our family. A guardian angel. If only she knew. Maybe you are just a family that deserves good things. I said maybe. Or maybe we know someone who has more resources than they let on. Her comment made me nervous, but I forced myself to respond casually. What do you mean? I mean, maybe someone in our extended family or friend group has done well for themselves and is finding ways to help us without making a big deal about it. It would explain why these gifts seem so perfectly timed and specific to our needs. Lisa was more perceptive than I had given her credit for. But perception without proof is just speculation, and I was confident that the legal structures we had established would protect my anonymity, even if someone tried to investigate the sources of these gifts. That would be nice to think, I said. But sometimes good things happen to good people without any special explanation. After Emma started at Stanford, my relationship with Lisa improved significantly. She seemed less stressed about money, more optimistic about her family's future, and more interested in maintaining connections with her extended family. She started calling more often, visiting Denver occasionally, and including Jake and me in family discussions about holidays and special occasions. But I also noticed that she never directly thanked me for offering to help with Emma's college expenses. Even after the scholarship had solved the problem entirely, she never circled back to acknowledge that I had been willing to contribute $10,000 to her daughter's education. It was as if my offer had never been made or as if she had never expected it to be serious in the first place. That realization helped me understand something important about how my family saw me. They did not view me as someone who had the resources to help with major financial challenges. They saw me as someone who might be able to contribute small amounts to large problems, but not as someone who could actually solve those problems. They did not know about my wealth. So, they could not appreciate the irony of the situation. But I could see it clearly. They were receiving anonymous gifts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars from the same brother they did not believe could afford to help them with much smaller amounts. The contrast between their expectations and the reality of my financial situation had become so absurd that I started to find it amusing rather than painful. 5 years after moving to Denver, I made a decision that surprised even Jake. I decided to tell my family the truth about the lottery winnings. Not because I wanted their gratitude or recognition, and not because I felt guilty about keeping the secret. I decided to tell them because I wanted to see how they would respond to learning that all of their financial problems over the past few years could have been solved instantly by someone they had dismissed as unable to help. I wanted to see if they would understand the lesson I had been trying to teach them about family loyalty and mutual support. The conversation took place during Thanksgiving dinner at my house in Denver. I had invited my parents, Lisa, her family, and Jake to spend the holiday with me, and for the first time in years, everyone had accepted the invitation. Maybe because things were going well for everyone, or maybe because the geographical distance had allowed old tensions to fade. It was Jake who suggested that Thanksgiving would be the perfect time to reveal the truth. They are all here. Everyone is in a good mood. And it has been long enough that they can probably handle the shock, he said as we prepared dinner together. Besides, I am tired of pretending that you are just doing okay when you are actually doing better than all of them combined. You think they deserve to know? I think you deserve to stop carrying this secret around. And I think they might learn something important about how they have been treating you all these years. We waited until after dinner when everyone was relaxed and comfortable before I made my announcement. I have something to tell you all, I said, standing up from the dining room table where we had been sharing stories and catching up on family news. Something I have been keeping to myself for a long time. The room got quiet and I could see varying degrees of curiosity and concern on their faces. 5 years ago, right before I moved to Denver, I won the lottery, $57 million. The silence that followed was complete and lasted for what felt like several minutes. My mother looked confused, as if she had not understood what I said. My father looked skeptical, as if he thought I was making a joke that he did not get. Lisa looked shocked and then angry, as if she had just realized she had been deceived. You won the lottery, my mother said finally. I won the lottery and I have been living off the investment income ever since. The business Jake and I run, it is funded entirely by my lottery winnings. The house we are sitting in, I bought it with cash. Everything you think you know about my financial situation has been a carefully maintained fiction. How much did you say? My father asked. $57 million before taxes, about $34 million after taxes. Currently worth about $42 million due to investment growth. Lisa found her voice first. Are you telling me that you have had $42 million this whole time and you let us struggle with money? You let Dad almost skip his surgery because we could not afford it. You let Emma almost miss out on Stanford. Actually, I did not let anyone miss out on anything. Dad got his surgery and Emma got her scholarship. Everyone got the help they needed. But you made us think we had to figure it out on our own. The same way you made me think I had to figure things out on my own when I supposedly lost my job and needed help with rent. The room got quiet again as the implications of my statement sank in. Wait, Lisa said slowly. Are you saying that was a test? I am saying that before I decided how to use my lottery winnings. I wanted to understand what kind of family I was part of. I wanted to know who would help me if I really needed it. And I looked around the table at their faces, seeing a mixture of understanding, anger, and embarrassment. And I learned that only one person in this family was willing to sacrifice their own financial security to help a family member in need. Only one person believed that family obligations extend beyond moral support and good advice. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly not enjoying being held up as an example of virtue that made the rest of the family look bad by comparison. Michael, my mother said quietly, we did not know you were really in trouble. We thought you were just going through a rough patch. A rough patch that included facing eviction. We thought you were being dramatic. You know how you can be sometimes. How I can be sometimes. Even now, learning that I had actually been wealthy during my supposed financial crisis. My mother was suggesting that my description of needing help had been exaggerated or manipulative. So if I had actually been evicted, if I had actually become homeless, you would have helped me then. She did not answer. Lisa, I said, turning to my sister, do you remember what you told me when I asked for help? You said that adults figure out their own problems. You said maybe this was a wake-up call for me to get serious about my career. I thought you were just having trouble transitioning between jobs. I did not know it was a real emergency. But when you needed help with Emma's college expenses, that was a real emergency that required family support. That is different. That was about Emma's future. And my supposedly being evicted was not about my future. The conversation continued for another hour, but the fundamental dynamic never changed. My family could not acknowledge that they had failed their own test of loyalty and mutual support. They continued to rationalize their previous responses while expressing hurt and anger that I had tested them in the first place. I cannot believe you have been lying to us for 5 years, Lisa said as the evening was winding down. I have not been lying to you. I have been protecting myself from people who demonstrated that they do not actually care about my welfare unless it is convenient for them. That is not fair. What is not fair is asking your brother to contribute $10,000 to your daughter's education while believing that same brother could not afford to help you with $3,000 when he was supposedly facing eviction. By the time everyone went to bed that night, it was clear that my revelation had not brought my family closer together. If anything, it had crystallized the differences in our values and priorities that had been developing for years. My parents seemed primarily focused on their own embarrassment at not having recognized my wealth sooner. Lisa seemed angry that I had resources I had not shared and hurt that I had tested her loyalty without her knowledge. Only Jake seemed to understand that the real issue was not the money or the secrecy, but the way we treated each other when someone was supposedly in need. The next morning, as everyone was preparing to leave, my father pulled me aside for a private conversation. Michael, I want you to know that I am proud of what you have accomplished with your business and your investments. You have done well for yourself. Thank you, Dad. But I also want you to understand that what you did testing us like that, it was not fair. We are your family. We should not have to prove our love to you. You are right, Dad. You should not have to prove your love to me. It should be obvious in how you treat me when I need help. We have always been here for you. Have you? Because when I supposedly needed help the most, you told me I needed to learn independence through suffering. When Jake offered to help me, you told him that was what family does. Which one is your actual position on family obligations? He did not have a good answer for that question. As my family packed their cars and prepared for the drive back to Arizona, I realized that I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because the conversation had gone well. It had not. But because I no longer had to carry the weight of a secret that had defined my life for half a decade, I also no longer had to wonder about my family's character or values. I knew exactly what they believed about mutual support and family loyalty, and I could make decisions about my relationships based on that knowledge rather than on hope or assumption. 6 months after the Thanksgiving dinner, Jake and I moved our business to a larger facility and hired 12 additional employees. We had proven that ethical financial services could be both profitable and socially beneficial, and we were ready to expand our impact. We also established a larger charitable foundation that makes anonymous gifts to families facing financial emergencies with special attention to situations where family members have failed to support each other. Every month we help people who have been let down by relatives who were too busy calculating costs and assigning blame to offer genuine assistance. It is satisfying work, and it allows me to use my wealth in ways that reflect the values I learned from watching my own family navigate crisis situations. My parents and Lisa and I still maintain contact, but our relationships have never fully recovered from the truth about my lottery winnings and the test I conducted. They seem to view me differently now. Not as someone who achieved unexpected success, but as someone who deceived them and judged them according to standards they did not know they were being measured against. They are not entirely wrong. I did deceive them and I did judge them. But I also learned something valuable about the difference between the family you are born into and the family you choose to build. Jake and I have built something together that neither of us could have achieved alone. We have created wealth that serves a purpose beyond our own comfort. Relationships based on mutual respect and shared values, and a business that makes our community stronger. Most importantly, we have demonstrated to ourselves and each other that when someone you care about needs help, you find a way to provide it. You do not calculate the cost or question whether they deserve assistance. You do not lecture them about independence or suggest that struggling will build character. You help them because that is what family does.